Digging deep for the book Synapse, I found myself being completely intrigued with the creation account and how the patterns overlay with various sciences. So what I did is I started digging into the way the periodic table is composed. The first thing I did was biology, by the way, the human bones, human construction, the way we're built, the way we're made. The periodic table was a pretty interesting way to identify the patterns in the creation account. And the creation account is broken down into 7 days. There's a period before the 7 days, and there are the 7 days, and then there's a period after 7 days. So the first row of the periodic table is really the period before day one. God hovers over the deep. So if you think about this, you've got one side that won't react, and then you've got one side that will. So the deep is going to react when the light's introduced on day one. So if you have hydrogen and you have helium, helium's not going to react, but hydrogen will. So you've got this hovering concept. So helium's light. So is hydrogen, by the way. So you have this like floating concept. If you have these two different groups, you have them also on each side of the periodic table, which is interesting, but they're different periodic tables, by the way. So it's just the common one that's like that. But then day one, you have the introduction of light. So let there be light. Well, what is light? Light's energy, or light is the introduction of both light and dark, because dark is energy too. And then you have this pattern that continues on throughout the entire periodic table, where each day, when you unpack it, each day the material that's available for the prior day allows the next day. And when you start looking at the way, when the earth is formed, and when water's formed, and when plants are formed, the material that's required for those things to exist come up on the periodic table for those days. It's mind-blowing. To me it is, anyway. I don't know. May not be to you, but for me it's fascinating. I mean, if God is big enough to create the universe, he's big enough to create a book, and big enough to make that book work for the physical world around us. But that's one of the things that I cover in Synapse, because I think it's important for us to have a level of empirical evidence of God, so we can get past the elementary garbage of whether or not God exists. I mean, at some point we've got to get to the point where we can get past the baby food of life and get into the solid food that Hebrews 5:14 to 6:1 talks about. We have to get past the elementary teachings so that we can get onto the real forgiveness and the real truth of finding Christ in this world, forgiving Christ, forgiving the entire body of Christ, not just one component, not just one person or one part, but all of Christ. It's time to forgive. But we can't do that as long as we're quibbling over the little things, like whether or not young earth or old earth makes sense, which is something else that I touch on too. I mean, that's actually pretty easily explained through physics. I mean, you have this concept. I mean, before day one, there's no earth, there's no universe, there's God, and there's the deep. Then day one, let there be light. Well, there's still no earth. So what's spinning? It's not earth. Then you have a concept, of this like separation of waters from above and below, with a vacuum in between, and then you have the waters below receding and exposing land on the next day. Well, I mean, eventually, okay, you have an earth, but what constitutes a day at that particular point? So we've got to sort of like move our way back from this, but at the same time, physics describes it, but not all people understand physics well enough to understand how it can, but it's something that I cover in this book, and I think it's at least an answer. I feel like it's a good answer, but at least it's an answer or something that can be teased out, and we can sort through whether or not it's actually feasible to consider that way. Synapse is far-reaching. One of the things that I touch on, and I would like to go much deeper on it, because it's got a lot of legs and it's got a lot of depth and opportunity. It's DNA and how DNA lines up. So one of the things. So we've got 23 chromosome pairs, so 46 chromosomes, but 23 chromosome pairs. If you break those chromosome pairs down into the cadence, the sequence of the Bible, then you can see the mirror effect of what happens or what's relative to those particular numbers, the 1, 2, 3, etc. All of a sudden, there's a little bit of clarity, almost like it's mapped accordingly. It's really kind of cool to see how that works. And then something else that I find to be particularly fascinating is the concept of RNA and how RNA can be triggered to cause certain things within us to be active. Certain genes are activated based on our environment, our food that we eat, or something else, right? So when that happens, then we can almost present like a different person. And it's a theory that I've got that is somehow the way that a person transitions from being like a soul to soul spirit sort of combination. In other words, waking up the internal self, the spiritual internal self. And I talk about discipleship a lot, but that's the idea, is when you see something in the wilderness or you eat honey from the end of your staff, then when that happens, then you wake up somehow. So if you wake up somehow, I think that's that RNA effect. I think that's where the physical meets the spiritual realm in the Bible. One of the specific topics that I get into regarding RNA and the way our psyche might be specifically mapped is through the distinct days of creation as outlined in the Bible. There's certain characteristics and certain things that happen in each one of the creation days. And the way the elasticity of the Bible works is it overlays different parts of the Bible. So like, let there be light is when Adam is created. Okay, you have mankind, fine. And then there's division, so that's when Eve is created. And then there's separation, Cain's cast out. You have all these different things that are happening. But if we think about the way people are in those particular scenarios, which one's the closest to God? Well, what's the diet for that period? When are we furthest from God? Well, what's the diet then? When are we, under the law and mean or whatever? Well, what's the diet then? If we dig into each one of those, we might have a window into a better. We might have a window into God's engineering and how God engineered us to behave and be. And that's one of the things that I dig into to some degree, at least to a point where it asks a lot of questions or causes us to think about how that could be possible. And I don't think you can grasp that or understand that or even begin to think about it until the concept is presented. And I mean, I can't wait to hear the feedback on it. I think it's fascinating. I mentioned before that Synapse covers biology. That also goes into the cipher because of the way the stories unfold and how important it is to manage those stories in a specific way. It's for this generational redemption. But what I've found is the creation account actually follows the bone structure of the human body to an eerie degree. And as it turns out, Ezekiel's temple is also it also matches the human body, and the Apostle Paul says that the human body is the temple. So if that's the case, then we have some piece of God within us, right? I mean, it's the temple of God. So the point is, why would the Bible not address the human body in a very tangible sense, in a tangible way? And I think it does. I mean, if it covers DNA, if it covers RNA, if it covers diet, if it covers the shape of the human body and Ezekiel's temple design, I think it's a pretty good argument. And I illustrate that with Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. Vitruvian architecture is according to Ezekiel's temple ratios and measurements, and then Da Vinci created that piece of art with those same ratios and those same dimensions, so that maybe it preserves, maybe it's saying something that he can't say openly. he does make a comment somewhere. I don't remember where it is, but it's illustrated in the book that he would tell us more if he was allowed. Whether or not that's according to the church or something else, I don't know. That's not really the point. But the Bible does depict biology. It's really cool.